Alright, so in this video, basically I kind of want to walk you through kind of something that I have to do pretty frequently, and that is clean data. The thing is when you are practicing working with data, usually you'll get a nice, clean spreadsheet and you just have to do a couple of things and that's it. But in real life, that isn't the case, hardly at all. And I'm just going to give you a slight taste of that with this little tutorial. And it's basically kind of more like a walkthrough. So usually you would think, okay, let's just dump it into Excel, and that's usually fine. If you have, like, say 5 or 10 of these dirty, addresses that you need to clean. But say if you have 50 or 100 or 1,000 addresses, 15,000, well, 1,500, let's make a nice number, 1,500 addresses to clean up. And they're in differing stages of messiness. The thing is that, you can manually do this, but why would you? And honestly, when I first encountered dealing with data like this, I did try to do it in Excel. And you just have to, again, be aware that you're going to have to do a lot of trimming on all of these. You have to get rid of these null values out of here, and things like that. So usually what I do, first thing I do, is I kind of inspect the data and see what I'm working with. And one thing I can see straight away is that there is some odd spacing issues here in between. It looks like here we have only one space in between the number and the direction, and then in the back, and that means that there probably is some trailing spaces, which is actually pretty consistent with data this messy. And I think the same thing is happening over here in the city. Yep, we have some trailing and some leading spacing issues. It looks like the state isn't so much so, and looks like the zip is pretty consistent. But sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes people put in just the 5-digit zip. Sometimes they put the full 9 number digit in there with a hyphen. So that's the thing with looking at data. You first just kind of want to see what you're working with and see kind of what you want to do. And first off, we need to figure out how to get rid of these spaces in here. Now with these, it's pretty easy. What you can do is you could easily go, you can do a trim on this column, and then you have to copy and paste that all the way down, and then copy and paste it into that column, right? That's very, very manual. Another thing you can do is do a separation or text to column, but again, you have to copy and paste, then go to the data tab, then do split to columns, fill out the form, and go. Yeah, and we see here that, it also splits out this extra space in there too, so you have to manually pull things over, not replace, but pull things over to make it better, So there's a lot of repetition, a lot of manual clicking, things like that. So I'm just going to undo that. So when I had to deal with this repeatedly for every report that I've had to touch, I always have to clean addresses. And that's one of the things that you kind of ask yourself when you are beginning to think about a solution or some type of automation, is that you have to say, okay, what am I repeatedly doing over and over again? That, and how much or how many things am I touching? So in this case, I'll be touching about 50 addresses. Do I want to do this manually for 50 addresses? Absolutely not. So that is where Python will come in. Now, I am going to use Google Colab for this example, but you can get Jupyter Notebook or access to one through Colab. You can get through Kaggle. But Colab for me is just easier because it's connected to my drive. So we'll just go from there. So when you first open it up, you'll see this. You can go with an example they give you. If you already have, your drive or your GitHub, you can hook that to it. I'm just going to do a new notebook. So let's go ahead and start a new one. Give it a moment. Okay, so it's loaded. And one of the things with Jupyter Notebook, here you can change the name. So in this example, I'm just going to call it clean addresses. And with Jupyter Notebook, you can do text or code, and you just literally just hover over in the middle of, you can either do it above the first field that pops up, or if you do it after. I'm going to do it above. And here it's just Markdown. If you don't know what Markdown is, I'll leave a link below to kind of show you what it is, but it's just a way to make text pretty. You can also use, you can toggle some headings if you want, and it will pre-populate it for you, so it kind of gives you everything you need right here, really. So this is just going to be cleaning some addresses. Okay. So there is AI, and there is a way to turn off, and I recommend going ahead and turning it off. So I do want everything there. I do want to show numbers. You can show indentation guides, that's fine. AI assistants, let's go ahead and turn those off. And the reason being is I tried recording this already, and the AI suggestions were messing me up. So let's just turn that off. Okay, so now for those of you who are familiar with Python, you're probably going to wonder why I'm not going to use Pandas library is because in my current role, I don't have access to Pandas, which would be awesome if I did, but I don't. So I'm going to do this old-fashioned way with just code. So bear with me, but you'll see why I'm doing it this way. Yeah, I guess it's kind of easy to work with. Actually, it's kind of, how do I put it? It's good to see it in a different format than using Pandas, because it gets you to think about a problem in a different way. So first off, what I do is, one, you can just you can export this as a CSV if you want to, but usually when I'm running my reports, I first have to go into SQL Server and run a couple queries to get these addresses. So I typically all I do is once, just imagine that this is coming from a database query, it's outputting below, I literally just copy and paste everything. That's literally what I do. So I'm going to do the same thing as I would in there, and I can actually do this with stuff from Excel too, because when you copy something from either SQL Server or from Excel, it copies any delimiters, and you'll see in a moment. So the first thing I do is I basically create a variable. And because I'm copying multiple rows, I use the triple quotes, because that allows me to have multiple lines. So there we go, you have everything in there. And let me back this up a little bit. Okay, so yeah, we do see some very interesting things going on here. So there's a lot more spacing issues than originally thought. We do have to get rid of the null values, and yeah, we do have, again, some spacing that we have to fix. So that's the thing, it's like you can't really see the spacing issues in Excel. You just kind of have to eyeball it literally. And if you have thousands of addresses that you are looking at, it's just not fun to do. All right, so let's go ahead and copy the variable real quick. And we're going to do another line of code. So let's go ahead and run that. And I actually just did a shortcut. It's Shift-Enter for me. You can hit this little play button here and it'll do the same thing. But yeah, if you let me hover over it for a moment so you can see the pop-up. So if you do Control-Enter, or in my case I do Shift-Enter, it will run it for you. Okay. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. Oh wow. So we are now seeing another layer of hidden things that we wouldn't have seen otherwise. So if we look at our address, this is our first one here. We see we have some delimiters. We have tabbing, which is indicates the columns, and then we have new lines. So the new lines is for each record. So the tabbing is these columns here, and the new lines are the rows. Okay, so the first thing, if you're analyzing data and you need to clean it up, you look for is, okay, what's the easiest thing I can tackle, or what is the thing that I need to tackle in order to start the process of analyzing? And that thing is these delimiters, because we want this kind of the same format, because our addresses need to stay in the same order in which they came in. Now here, you could easily do this, bring in a CSV and using Pandas on it. That's the caveat here, but I don't have access to Pandas or Jupyter Notebook either, so I'm doing all this in code. But it's a good exercise. So what I like to do is let's do the address list first. So that would be messy address data. And because we brought it in as a string, we can do string operations on it like split. And split is Python's version of text to column, but in this case we can do text to column as well as text to row. So the text to row would be the new lines. So as you see here, we have one address and then our other address ends in a new line. So we know that every address ends with a new line. And if we run this, sorry, address list again. If we run this, we get to see that all of our addresses are now in new lines. So that's that address, and now the only thing we have to worry about is the tabbing, and that's what we'll work on next. So usually what I try to do before I tackle multiple addresses at once, I usually like to work with one, get it to a point that I like the output, and I have a set of instructions that I can apply to all of them. Because if you try to throw all of these in here and try to edit them all right now, you can come into a lot of issues and problems when you do that. So the thing is always to think about breaking up your problems so that they're easier for you to solve. Because at this point, if I try to do all of this right now, it would be a headache to try to solve. So what I do is I try to bring out one. So in this case, let's look at, we'll do the first one, I guess. This first one. Oopsie. Okay, thank you. All right. Oh, I'm not trying to generate anything. Okay, so what we need to do now is work on our test. Well, let's just do example address. Let's make it simple. Because this is the address that is going to be our example. And we have our address list. And you use square brackets to pull out individual records, right? Or individual addresses you want. Now I want the first one. You would think it would be 1, but it's not. Lists, in this case, this is what address list is that actual list, and or also called an array, but Python calls them lists. And arrays and lists, they are indexed. So if you want the first index, you would actually have to do 1 minus 1, which would be 0, because all arrays begin with 0. So since I want the first one, this will actually be 0, and if I go ahead and run this and call it, it will pull out this first one that I wanted to pull out, this very first one. Same thing if I wanted the last one. I could count this out and try to figure out what this last one is, or I can actually do what is called a negative list. So if we know it starts at 1, -1 would actually be the end. So let's go ahead and run that so you can see, and you see that's the end. Now if you know the address you want is, say, 25 minus that would be 24, and that's the address that will pop out at whatever address is there at 24, right? Or 25 or 24. Okay, but that is not what I want. I want to change that back to the 0. Okay, so now I've got my example address I'm going to work with. So the next thing that we need to do is go ahead and break it up into columns. And so we have to do another split, but this time on the tabbing. So split example address, and this time the example address split on the tabbing. And let's print that out so we can see it. And there we go. So we have each part of the address now has its own address. It has its own index. So now we can pick and choose which part we want to actually clean up. And in this case, it is this part here. It's the first part because we have some odd spacing that we need to get rid of. We also have to do it to the city, but we'll get there. Okay, so let's work on that. So again, remember our indexing, we work with lists. So we got split example address. What I want to work on is the first part. So it's not 1, it's 0. And let's call this test street. And let's just make sure that we are pulling the right part of the address. And we are. So now we can do work on just the street portion. So how we do that is we actually have to kind of like loop through each part of this. Well, first we need to separate them, right? Kind of like text to column. So what I'm trying to do here is when we have that and we do data text to column, now what I want to do is spacing, right? So I apply that, but my hope is that using Python we won't get the same behavior as we're getting here. So let's see if we can do that. Okay, so I need something like a container to hold the pieces of my address as I work through them. So we're just going to call this let's call it temp bucket. Not it's just going to be a list that holds everything temporarily. So we're going to do a for loop. So for item, actually wait, we need to do something first. We need to do the split first. I keep forgetting. Okay. So so we called that. Now we need to split it. So I'm going to actually do, because I'm going to tack on a split to this address because I'm calling it out. I know already that it's a string. So I'm going to do a split on this, but on the spacing. And what should happen is it should pull this part of the address out up here, and then it's going to start splitting on the spacing. So we'll have individual rows for the spacing. So let's see what happens, and it does. And so we also get this weird behavior because it's catching the spacing, it's popping those out. So we have to clean this up even more because it's bringing it's creating a record for where the space occurred. So we need to get rid of that. So let's hide this output for right now. So again, we're going to use our temp bucket. Because we know that test street is now a list, we can go through the list and start cleaning it up. So there is an easier way of doing this, but I'm doing the for loop to show you. And then we'll change that to a list comprehension, which is so much cleaner. But I kind of want to show you how this is done and then show you the comprehension. So for item in test street, what we want to do is if the item has or doesn't have or isn't blank, right? So we have some blanks here. So if it's not blank, then we want to put it into the temp bucket. So temp bucket. And because this is a list, we use append. And what that does is it adds it to the list. And it does it in order, right? And then we're going to do string item because I just want to make sure that everything that's coming in here remains a string. It is a string already, I understand, but sometimes you never know, something weird might happen. So I want to make sure everything is a string because what Python does is it assumes the value coming in, it infers it, so it guesses what it might be. So I want it to not guess that this street or this building number is like integer. I don't want it to assume that it's an integer. I want to assume that it's a string because I have to do work on it with string functions, built-in string functions. Okay, so here what I'm going to do is a write strip. Because if we look at our information, well, it looks like it did strip it out. It does look like it stripped it, but sometimes you never know. Sometimes it doesn't strip it correctly or whatnot, but let's just make sure that everything's clean, that there's nothing to the right of it. And then I want to, at the very end, I want it to print out my temp bucket. All right, let's see what happens. Okay, so we have each part of the address cleaned up. There's no spaces at all, so now it's time to go back in and add those spaces. So let's go ahead and add another code line. And how you would do that is actually with a join. So, so for example, if I just wanted to print this just to show you, I could do our space, and then we do dot join, and then we take the list that we want to, what join does is it iterates over this list, and everything that it comes across, it'll add it, then add a space, add it, then add a space. Except for the very last one, it won't add a space. And we'll see here what it does. So yeah, this is the behavior that I want, and it cleans it up. I didn't have to delete any of these spaces myself, right? So that is awesome. Okay, so now that I've got the behavior and the code in order to repeat this, it's time to actually create what's called a comprehension. So another example of this. So let's do another test street. We'll call this test street version 2. It's technically version 1, but we'll just go ahead and do version 2. So what this will do is so first, remember our for loop. We'll go ahead and build this out. So our for loop above, if you're thinking about list comprehension, it's basically a for loop kind of deconstructed. So the first thing you start with is what you want to be added to the new list. So in this case, it's item. So this is part here. And then we add the for item in, and then we did test street, right? So that is this constructed as a list comprehension. But that's technically not what I want. What I want to do is pull in a new address. So if we go back up here, we can do our address list. Actually, we'll just pull in the other one. So we'll just do this one here. So we'll just pull this part here because we're going to condense it a little bit. So instead of test street, what we're doing is we're bringing in the original. We want the split address 1, which is the street address, not the city or state or zip. We're just bringing in that portion. We're splitting on the spaces. And then finally, we need this condition to tell it when to add it or not. So we tack on, literally copy this, and we tack it on to the end, like so. So we have it tacked on to the end. All right, and then if we run this, it should output exactly the same thing as our for loop. And it does. So we have exactly the same behavior here as we do up here, but now with the list comprehension, it's in one line instead of, what, 5 or 4 lines into one now. Okay, so we have that part. Okay, so now let's put it all together. And I'm just going to copy all of this code, and we will just walk through it. Okay. So this is basically the final portion. What I showed you was splitting it. So this is for each row, and then we covered each tab, so each column. Here is some stripping I do, and then I get rid of null values that exist in the address. And then another thing I do, obviously, is get rid of the stripping, so getting rid of the weird spacing. There's another R strip in here. I believe it's right here. This one gets rid of the spacing that occurs after cities as well. So it'll go through all of them and strip out the end for everything. And then what we need to do is get rid of some duplicates. Now, I believe there might be some duplicates. Let's sort. Let's go back up here to our list. And if we do sorted, let's see if we can do sorted on this address list. Yes, so it sorts it. So we see we may have a couple of, yeah. There we go, we have some duplication right here. So phaser range. Some of these aren't. Oh, some of these might be. So that's the thing about, analyzing data, especially like raw data like this, and even in my current job, you can automate a lot of things, but you actually have to go through like an eyeball and kind of see, okay, are some of these duplicates or not? Is it just a typo? Maybe in some instances it could be the exact same address. Like, for example, in real life, I've had addresses where the address will be the same, but the city, because of the way the boundaries are, sometimes the city is in a boundary with another town, but yet they share the same address and the same zip. So there's like weird instances where that happens, or sometimes, they say like circle and it's loop, it just depends. So there's some instances where you do have to kind of manually figure out, okay, are there duplicates there? Are they the same? And that's how you just have to look and see whether that is the case. In this case, I would say these two would be probably duplicates. So you actually have to kind of go through and see. Oh, here we go. Here's a perfect duplicate right here. For example, sweet is spelt out, and then you have sweet abbreviated. And I see this a lot when I'm working with addresses, where you have, the street spelled out and then street abbreviated, but technically it's a duplicate. So Python won't catch this, neither will Excel. It's just something you have to kind of like be aware of, be knowledgeable in whatever data you're working with. Okay, so we know we do have some duplicates, at least at the very end. Well, because we did the sorting. So let's go back. Okay, so what should happen when we go through this part is that it should clean up any duplication here. Okay, so let's go ahead, and I just realized I kind of made a mistake here, so make sure you have your variables in the right order and spelled correctly. Okay, so we're getting rid of spacing, which is what we did above, and then what we're going to do is to make sure that we don't have any duplicates. So after all the addresses are cleaned, we've gotten rid of any weird spacing, got rid of a bunch of nulls, or values that are null in quotes because it's a string. What it should do is it should look at every address and spit out those addresses that are true duplicates that Python recognizes. And again, like I said before, there's some instances where you're going to have to just look at the data and see if it's an actual duplicate or not, or like we saw earlier, some of those were kind of duplicates-ish. But the ones that are true duplicates, which was the very last one here, that one actually is a duplicate. So I don't know if it would catch that because I haven't created an actual condition in here to convert sweet, abbreviated, and spelled out. I didn't build that conversion, so that's something that I might have to think about if I keep running into that issue. Is, maybe I should add a condition in there to clean those up too, so I don't have to do them manually. But in this case, we're just going to run this and see what happens. So I'm able to bring in the doc string, so I don't have to do anything manually. So let's go ahead and we're going to call our clean addresses. Actually, let's run this, make sure it's ready to go. And we're going to bring in our, what did I name it? Messy data? Messy address data. Okay, and pop that in there and run it. And oh my gosh, it's so nice looking. Now we can read it and see if we got rid of any duplicates. Looks like we kind of have still some duplicates, but if we had some true ones, actually, let's just make this a true one so you can see it in all its beautiful entirety. So I believe that's it. Yeah, we'll do sweet. Actually, let's make it uppercase. Let's run that again, and let's go back down, and we should only have one. And there we go. We only have one. So that's the thing with sets, is that if you notice that I added the set, the thing is that with sets you have to be careful of is that they don't put things in order. But in this case, I believe I did a sort on it. I think. It is in order. It's in alphanumeric order. So, but you have to be aware of that if you are using sets. That sometimes that's the case. Oh, and then I didn't get rid of the spacing with the cities. But at the same time, I could do the same thing with the address that I did above, where I did the split here, but then on the city. And we know the cities are -1, -2, -3 in always, so that's the pattern, right? Because even if we do have, for example, here we have this suite, you can't count forward because in most cases it's city, street, then city. So that's another thing you have to kind of think about ahead of, actually cleaning things up is, okay, what patterns are there in the data that's messy? What patterns make it clean? What positions are there that I can tweak to clean things up? So honestly, how to fix that, I've already fixed it once with the address list, so I'll just repeat that code. But for the city, for any of those cities that are 2 words, right? Or 2 words. Okay, so hopefully this is helpful for you to kind of see what, being a data analyst in the real life actually entails, and how you have to kind of think through your problems and break them up, look for patterns, see where you can add automation, and then go from there. So again, go ahead and read my blog post on this. I have way more code involved with what I do with addresses at work that has some of the conditions I mentioned earlier. But hopefully that was helpful for you. If it was, give it a thumbs up. If you're interested in Python and how to make it work for you, I am in the process of writing a book, and 3 of the first chapters are written and are available as a sample. Plus, if you're not sure how to study, you've been having issues with studying on your own, self-study is hard. There's also a chapter on how I do it, keeping my costs low and yet being very productive. So sign up for my newsletter if you want the book and any details regarding that. Until next time, friends.